Welcome to the series Healing Addiction is Fast and Easy. I'm Jorge Cardenas, your host. In the previous video, Becoming a Good Sponsor, Part 1, I pointed out that I have to become involved. I am going to be the catalyst that is going to cause the change. The first question that came to my mind when I realized that I needed to get involved and that there was no one that had more to gain than me, then some questions began to pop in my head when I said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, or with God, all things are possible. What I noticed is that I was moving toward God. I was not relying on my own thinking, but I was relying more on the correct thinking, and I did it really by accident until I realized that the same steps that the addict has to take in order to not be an addict anymore are the same steps that I had to take as a sponsor, as a better parent, in that I was using faulty thinking and I needed to go to godly thinking. And so to become a good sponsor, I invite you to go back to the first 6 videos and recognize that your brain is filled with a whole bunch of negative thoughts that kept you from being a good father, that kept you from being a good trainer, that kept you from being a good sponsor. And one of the first questions that came to my mind after I went through that process and I studied Mr. Lehman's Total Transformation, and I began to hold my son more and more accountable, I realized that I just didn't really have a good concept of what success was and what I was trying to do. Now, it is possible, for example, to dry an alcoholic, and we will have a dry alcoholic, someone that has a whole bunch of negative and destructive thoughts in their mind, and I would not really have healed his addiction, which is these mountains and mountains of faulty thinking that causes almost like thinking jails, thinking prisons where he performs during his life and he's not able to escape. And so I began to go back to the same steps as the addicted went through, and what I realized is that there are 2 types of success in the world. According to what the world has to offer, I found that we chase power, pleasure, or possessions. And I am, to say I am a good example of chasing all of those things, and at some point it's almost becomes inevitable that most of us are going to try to do that. But what I have found is that even though I have acquired some economic success and some professional success and some achievements in the intellectual side, I found myself that none of those things were fulfilling and that I was willing to give them up for the success of my children. And so what I want you to realize is that, or what I came to realize, I want you to know, is that when we define success as what the world has to offer, possessions, pleasure, or power, once you achieve them, you find them that they are just insufficient to make you completely happy. But I want you to know that that was part of my human thinking. When I changed my thinking to godly thinking, then all of a sudden I began to chase things that were just less difficult to measure, but that become far more important and far more fulfilling than the things that this world has to offer. And so, for example, there is a verse in the Bible that says that we ought to look for wisdom, faith, and love. And indeed, it says that love is the most important one. So, since I decided that I was going to become a better and better sponsor, and that I was the man for the job, and that with God all things are possible, and that God will never give me anything beyond my ability, then I began to realize that I needed more wisdom. And in James, it teaches us that we do not have because we do not ask for. And in Mark 11:24 says, when you ask and it will be given to you. Ask as if you have received and it will be given to you. And in Matthew 7:7 it says, ask and you shall receive, knock and the door will open, ask and it will be given to you. So I came to realize that if I needed wisdom, all I had to say is, God makes me wiser and wiser. God makes my faith stronger and stronger. God makes me love all my neighbors. And I began to realize that if I wanted to teach my child, if I wanted to teach my son to eliminate some of his worldly thinking and replace it with godly thinking, that I had to do the same thing. And the interesting part is when I accepted my job as the trainer to my son, I realized that God was training me. That the meaning is that connection that I have with him, and that he is my sponsor, and that he is the one that holds me accountable to my thought, to my action, and to my outcome. What I came to realize is then that God loves me a whole lot more than I realize. Now what I want you to realize is that you must go through the same process as the addicted person in taking those steps. And that to some degree you can measure success if you want to chase what the world has to offer, but my suggestion is that it is just not enough. And being that today is August 18, 2014, I want you to know that it's still fresh in our minds that Robin Williams committed suicide. A successful, wealthy, powerful person that most likely was found out that what the world has to offer is just simply not fulfilling. And so my advice to you is that even if you don't have a God person, that you simply begin to search for the things that God has to offer you. And if you want to become a good sponsor, you must learn to change your worldly thinking to godly thinking in order to be able to become the correct trainer for the addicted person that is in your life. A final point that I want to make about this is that in the process, I realize that because of my son's problem, I came closer to God, and that without that problem of my son's problem, probably I would have continued to live a life that at the end of time would have given me not enough. But because of my son's problem, now I have become closer to God, and I began to serve him, and I declare myself at his will and for his purpose. Now I constantly repeat, God makes me wiser and wiser. God makes my faith stronger and stronger. God makes me a better and better parent. God makes me a better and better trainer. God makes me a better and better sponsor. God is my all. God is my strength. God is my fortress. God is my provider. I began to realize that I was created for this very purpose. Thank you.